Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of From Idea to Launch. Today, what we're doing is we're just going to recap what we did, and we're going to go slowly through adding some API routes to NextJS. I'm going to try and make this really short and concise, and then do another video for Mongo and JWT. Although we'll do a little bit of Mongo today. So last time we left off, we left with this form here. I added a couple things. Added some nice colors, fixed up the styling a little bit into the different fonts. And I also have chose to use a new library, and I'll give you a quick tour here. Last time we used a reducer, or used reducer. This time I chose to use Formic, and I just discovered it. A friend of mine pointed it my way, and I thought, Formic is too complicated, but actually really simple. So I went through and I just redid it using Formic, and yup. So we have a nice schema validation here. I passed the schema validator into Formic, and Formic handles everything very nicely with this get field props on top of my inputs. So I'm still using the labels we created, the inputs we created before to handle all of the UI states, but then Formic is doing the nice logic for us, which is good. Wow, that's a valid email? I didn't realize. Perfect. So what we like to do today is when I do my password, blah, 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 and I click login, I want it to do something. So currently it's not doing anything, but I'd like to do something similarly with sign up. I want to be able to sign up, but it doesn't do anything. So what we're going to do is we're going to create this handle submit function, which passes us two things with Formic. One is the values of the fields. The other one is the context, or I'm calling it context, but it's just a bunch of helper functions that allow us to manipulate better what is inside of the what is inside of the state of Formic. Something like setting the loading state, setting the submitting state, the validation, handling with errors, that sort of thing. So let's briefly take a look. So we have a bunch of functions here: reset form, set errors, set field errors, set field touch, blah, blah, blah. We're going to deal with set submitting and set errors in here. So I'm just going to write them in. I'm just going to destruct them, structure them out. Set submitting and set errors. Perfect. Now what we're going to do is we're going to create our first API route with NextJS. So we're going to go on our pages. We're going to say API slash, trying to hit slash, but I'm hitting shift, slash, and we're going to call it authorize, or maybe authenticate.js. There we go. Now inside of any API route, it sort of becomes like a serverless function. Similarly, all your pages, every file in here becomes like a serverless function. More than likely, an underscore app and underscore document don't become them, but each individual page, like login and index, will become a serverless function that are served independently, and they can scale infinitely, which is really great. On a page-for-page basis, just wrap your mind around that. That's brilliant. So what we're doing here is we're going to create an API route, so API slash authenticate, and when we hit this is going to be on the back end, you can call it. So this is actually Node.js. Node.js codes in here, and there's a fancy, because we're still working in the Next.js library, we have ES6 syntax or ESNext syntax, whatever you want to call it, as well as some awesome handlers and things done, so it makes it simple for us. So for example, all we have to do is export a single function, export default. It's going to be async. We're going to do some async stuff in there that looks like an express request handler, pretty much because it is. But it's a Node.js request handler. You get the request object, the response object, and we can do a bunch of stuff in here, which is great. Things we want to be doing is get the data out of the body. So we want the name, the email, and the password out of the body. What am I doing? Do I even know how to write JavaScript? Rec.body. And there's a body parser built into this, so it's already handling parsing of the body for us, which is great. We want to do something like check if there is already a user, and we also want to do things like log in the user. At the very end, we'll do a to-do because we won't do this in this video, but we're going to sign a JWT token, or JWT, JSON Web Token, that'll allow people to sign in. For now, we'll just do res.end, which just sends a 200. Okay. Perfect. So before we get started, let's just go ahead and print these things out. Console.log, name, email, and password. We should also do a bunch of like sanity checks here. if we want this to be a post request, you are creating or logging in a resource and you're sending data to this resource, so we don't want to do anything but post requests. So we can say rec.method not equals post. So if it's not post, then we can return res.end, and we've got to send a status actually. The status of 405, so method not accepted or not allowed, and then end. Otherwise, we can jump right into doing this creation, which is lovely. And so we'll print these things out from our login page, but how do we end up sending this data to the login page? So what we'll do here is we'll actually, oh, I already made async, perfect. We're going to use a fetch request, which is going to be great. So we're going to get some requests from that. Request equals await. Fetch, I guess if we're using await, this is more like the response. But that's fine, I prefer to use the request. Let's use request. Request, fetch. Inside of here, we're going to say API / authenticate. And we're going to pass a couple options. One is the method. Like we just saw, it needs to be post. So post. One is the headers. We don't need a ton of them right now. The only one we need is content type. With that body parser know what kind of data we're actually sending. Application. JSON is one we're sending today. And then the actual body. The body JSON.string. Oh, it's one more thing I want to send. So let's spread in those values. Whatever we get from Formic, throw it in there. We're going to want all of them. The other one we want is the state there, which is sign up. Just allow us to let us know, are we in the sign up mode or are we actually someone trying to log in? From there, we can say if the request was okay. Request was okay. We'll do some stuff here to do. We'll keep this for next video. What do we do when we get this response back? Next video. Otherwise, there's some sort of error. Errors. Either way, once this request comes back, because we're using the await, it's kind of synchronous. So once that request comes back, we're going to say set submitting to false, because either we're going to get something going to happen here, more than likely we get redirected, or there's errors and we need to unsubmit the form or get rid of submitting state and pop up the errors. So to do that, what we're going to say is just set errors, and they're not specific for a field. So I'm just going to put in here general as an errors object. And what we'll do is we'll get the data out of the request. So we can const error equals await request.text. And then if you have an error, we'll take that. Otherwise, what we'll do is we'll take there was a problem oh my gosh, I can't type. Authenticating you with that email and password combination, period. There's some generic email. There was a problem. Otherwise, we could take some more specific error that's sent back from the server, which is our API function. Good, so this right here should be, oh, I don't think I imported fetch. I always like to import fetch just in case. Fetch from, and I always import the isomorphic version. Isomorphic fetch. Isomorphic fetch just allows us to use the same fetch library on the back end and on the front end, which is great. And I always include this ponyfill just to make sure that if I am working in an older browser for some reason, even though I'm not a huge fan of just coding for older browsers, at least it'll work. You don't have to have a built-in fetch. Perfect. So this will fetch, this will send all of our data plus sign up to that backend route, which we just created over here. And oops, I forgot one, is sign up. So let's go ahead and just run this before we get into the actual implementation of doing sign up. Isomorphic fetch, can't find it. Get out, you can't find it. Yarn dev. Restart the server, maybe there was just a jumble. Okay, here, refresh. We can't find isomorphic fetch. Oh, my mistake. Isomorphic unfetch. There we go. Perfect. Okay, so let's go ahead and try and log in. I'm just going to put 123, log in. Ooh, set submitting of undefined. I see it needs the, we can't destructure this. It needs the context. That's fine. Context. Probably it needs like a this property or something, some sort of binding. Can't destructure it. That's okay. Context.setErrors, context.setSubmitting. Wonderful. One more time. Log in. Oh no, circular structure. What? It must be values. What's wrong with values? Console.log. Values. What's going on there? I thought I worked this all out before. It's not working now. Take a look here. Name, email, password. I showed my password again. I'll have to blur this screen. Class. What is this class? Oh. Did I? Oh, you know what? I'm calling it twice. Because I think I have it as an on-click handler. That's what it was. There we go. We'll just cut that part out. Perfect. Okay, now it should be fine. Stop this password nonsense. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Log in. There we go. No errors. We're all happy. Over here, you can see the password, the email, and the name, which is perfect. So now what we'll do, or you can also see it, I guess this is the whole purpose, you can see it here as well on the back end. Because it's the back end, it's running in Node.js, you'll see it in the terminal when you're running in the server. So you can see the email, the password, and the isSignup was passed from our front end to the back end with that fetch call, which is great. So in here, what we want to do is we want to connect to the database, which will be MongoDB. We're going to check whether some users are there, create them if they don't exist, and log them in if they do exist. So for that, I created a couple of different utilities. One is the database service. The database service, all it does is have this connect function that checks if Mongo is already connected and then proceeds to connect. We don't need to wait here because MongoDB has this built-in logic. When you do a query with a model, which will be our user model, we won't need to wait for a connection to happen because internally it'll wait automatically. And the other one I created was this auth service. So I'm using a service called password.now.sh. And this just allows us to store encrypted passwords without having to do much extra work. So we can use some HTTP API just to store and retrieve and validate passwords. So in here we have some more fetch requests just briefly. So to create a password, you just pass in the password you want to use or a hash. You call this, you post to this create URL. From there we get an ID back, which is our reference. So when we go to validate the passwords, we can hit up this URL, which is API get password from password.now.sh, and we pass in the password we want to check against. So the password ID versus the password. I've modified our user model to allow for storing the password. And then what we'll do is in Authenticate, we'll make sure that we, one, when we're signing up, create that user. We'll say that method you saw in auth service. And the other one is when we're validating, make sure we validate against it correctly. Perfect. So let's go ahead and do that. First thing first, let's import that database service. Import database service from up 1, up 2, because we're down inside of API, inside of pages, and then services database. We're also going to need the auth service. Auth service from auth. And we'll import the last thing we need is the user model from models user. So we got all this data here, which is great. Next thing we want to do, we'll create this temporary variable here just so we don't have to do some reuse. So we're going to get that user because eventually we're going to send back some data about the user, or at least hash the user into some sort of token. Hash is probably the wrong word. We'll get rid of this console statement. So we can check here if we are signing up. We have some logic that says, let's try and find a user. Make sure we don't have any duplicates. So we'll set user is equal to await. You know what we forgot? Connect to the database. So first things first, database service service.connect. Again, we're not going to wait for it because when I call over here, user.find one, if this is the actual first call, it's going to wait automatically until the database connection is established. So we have user.find one. We're going to search by email that we got in over here. If we, for some reason, have the user come back in the sign-up mode, it means we already have one. So we're going to send back an error rather, status. It'll be 400. It's a bad request. You can't do that. And maybe not the best response code, but I'm not really sure right now which one to put. So 400. An account with already, exists for that email, or for email, just so we can specify email. There we go. So that will then go back. We have that handler that says if you have an error and it's not a 200, then we can display that. So I'll show you that in a minute. Good. The second thing is, if you don't have a user and you are trying to create, then we can create you a user. So user equals new user, which is lovely. You can pass in the name, the, what was it, email. The other one was password. So password here, how do we store it? Password ID is what we're going to call it. And we're going to use our auth service. So await, it's asynchronous. Auth service dot create user, I believe it was called. And we'll pass in the user's password that we want to store. Once that's done, we can do user.save, make sure it's persisted and it's async. And then we can go on to, which we'll cover next video, signing a JWT and setting that back. So otherwise, we are trying to log in, not sign in. We want to do the same thing. Do we have that user? Because we should. Await user.find1 email. Now let me see. I should probably just do that either way, because equals await user dot, seems like I'm doing it both times no matter what. Find one email. So right away, just try and find one in the email, and then we'll do some logic like if you're signing up versus if you're not. So then if you don't have a user and you are trying to log in, which is what we're doing here, we want to send some sort of return. Ooh, I forgot to return over here. Safety, return res.status 400. Again, I'm not really sure what to do here. Probably 401 is better, unauthorized, but you don't have an account, so kind of a bad request. And no account exists. I don't know if you can I tell you that? No account exists? Maybe I can. For email. There we are. Otherwise, we want to log in. So what we're going to do is we're just going to check to make sure that the password we submitted in this form actually matches what we stored. So what we can do is use our auth service again. We can say not await auth service dot validate password versus the user that we have gotten already. User dot password ID that we stored originally, and the password that were passed in through text. And if it's not valid, what we can say here is return res.end. This is a perfect space for, whoops, res.status 401.end. So you are fully unauthorized. Otherwise, again, you have the user, you didn't return unauthorized, so you loop out here, and we're going to sign that JWT, you're authenticated correctly, and send it back. Perfect. So briefly again, we post over here, connect to the database, make sure it's obviously a post request, connect to the database, get all of our data out of that body, try and find a user with the email that you just sent. If you're signing up and you have a user, send an error. You already have a user for this account with that email. You can't sign up again. Otherwise, we can just go ahead and sign up, create a new user, save, and then authorize a token. Otherwise, we are trying to log in, and if you don't have a user and you're trying to log in, we should send an error. We need a user before you can log in. Otherwise, if you are a user, we'll go ahead and check that validate password with that password ID for the password service. And if you don't match, we'll to return unauthorized. Otherwise, if you do match, we can go ahead and issue a JWT. Perfect. Okay, that's a lot. Let's just try to run through this. So logging in shouldn't do anything because no account exists, which is perfect. So you can see that our code works, that if we come through here, we're getting that specific error that says no account exists for that email because we tried to look for a user, we didn't have one, and we're not signing up. So let's go ahead and sign up. I'll enter my name. All this stuff is popping up, and that's super annoying. Eric, that's my email. I'll just do 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Sign up. Loading. There we go. So things happened. Of course, we're not navigating anywhere. We don't have any pop-ups because we're not really sending anything back, but it looks like a 200 happened because we didn't get any errors. What we can do here is we can check with MongoDB. So here's MongoDB Compass. I'll refresh. We should have one user document, which is great. And you can look in here. There's me. There's my name. And there's that password ID that allows us to validate through the external service password, which is great. So that means then I can log in. If I go to the login form, I'll pass in a bad password, blah, 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 blah. There we go, some junk. I'll click login, and There we go. So we got that 401 response code. If we look here at the network, we got that 401 in there. We also check if we try and sign up again for some reason. Here we go. Some magic password in there. We try and sign up. It's going to say we already have an account for that one, which is good. So let's go back to login, just verifying. Stop popping up. Stop. It's because it's inside the form. I have to move it. I'll move it right now. As long as it's not in the form. Whoops, over here. So where's that form? Where's the form? Here's the form. Close it. Yeah. All the way down here. I might mess up the styling. But that's fine. Here. Take this out. PPP. Good. Okay. So I'll just like that. Put it outside here. Let's see what it looks like. Log in. Oh, no. Oh, I need errors in there. Darn it. Let's put the errors back in underneath the button. There. Okay. So the styling's not perfect, but at least now it won't. There we go. You can toggle them and it won't refresh. So I'll fix the styling later, but that's fine. So we have an account now. We'll do, like I showed, toss in some junk, log in. There's a problem. We didn't get it correctly. But if we pass it correctly, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and log in, and success. And you can see over here in the panel, you get 401 before, but then we got that 200 success. So next video, what we'll cover here is actually sending out and dealing with JWT tokens and cookies in the browser to maintain some sort of session. Trying to keep these short so that we can get through them more quickly and they have more bite-sized, useful pieces of information. So this one, we just covered building out a request handler in an API route of NextJS. Like and subscribe. Thanks for watching. See you next time.